Today I'm joined by Darren Litton. Darren is the founder and Chief Chocoholic of Cocoba, who create great quality chocolate products and drinks to enjoy. So welcome, Darren.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So Darren, tell us a little bit about, we all love chocolate, so tell us a little bit more about Cocoba.
So Cocoba started back in 2012. We had a small 5 square meter kiosk at Brent Cross Shopping Centre to test the concept. And the concept was to have a chocolate cafe. So specializing in hot chocolate, iced chocolate. We did amazing teas and coffees there as well, and then a retail range to accompany that within the kiosk. So we were there for about a year and to test it, tweak it, and then a year later we opened our first chocolate cafe in Bluewater Shopping Centre. So we've got about 50 covers there, 50 seats, retail area, and then a counter selling, chocolate items, but also selling paninis, baps, toasties. So if you think of it, a cross between Rails, Patisserie, Bellery, Costa, Starbucks, Nero, but obviously with the whole chocolate theme, chocolate desserts, hot chocolates and iced chocolate. So, we wanted people who came in there to still enjoy a croissant and a pot of tea, as well as enjoying an amazing hot chocolate made from pure Belgian chocolate and a really, really amazing experience. So we started making chocolate products behind the counter when we opened, and then we found ourselves, a year or two later, sending pallets of retail products from behind the shop. So we took out a small production unit in Northfleet in Kent. We soon outgrew that and took on a unit about 4 times the size up the road, also in Northfleet in Kent. And then following that, about 3.5 years ago, we opened up production unit where we are now, where we have our offices and production units. So now the majority of the business is out of the production unit. So we supply John Lewis, Selfridges, farm shops, delis throughout the UK. We export to numerous countries. We have a franchisee, a shop in Maidenhead, trading under Cocoba. We do private labels, so we make for some of the supermarkets as well. So we sell online. So yeah, a lot of moving parts.
Wow. Certainly grown since those days of a pop-up shop in, where was it?
Yes,
Cross, I think.
Brent Cross, that's right. Yeah.
That's great. Look, thank you for that background. And by the way, I've been to your shopping cafe in Bluewater. Yeah, fantastic. The hot chocolates are to die for. So
yeah, they really are.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'd certainly recommend that people give that a try.
Thank you.
So look, Darren, I'm always interested to find out why and how people went into business. So was being a business owner something that you always wanted to do? How did you start out in business?
Yeah, so always something I wanted to do. So I'm from Australia. So I studied to be a chartered accountant, and I was working at Deloitte in Australia. Came over to the UK. I was working at PwC and then at Goldman Sachs and then at HSBC. Never really loved corporate. It wasn't really for me. Always wanted to have my own business, but I never wanted to leave and do something for the sake of it. So it probably took a little while to figure out what I wanted to do. Growing up in Australia, my late grandfather would make me hot chocolate from real chocolate. Came over to the UK, couldn't find that over here. I love chocolate, absolutely love coffee, huge coffee culture in Australia. So whereas here, it's a lot bigger than it was, so still growing. So decided to, leave my corporate life behind and open a chocolate cafe.
So it's just sort of evolved from.
It has, yeah.
I find it really interesting, like how people end up in the types of business that they want. So yeah, it was work. You always knew you wanted to be a business owner, but not quite sure what it was that was going to lead you. But then you put the two things together. The experience from your childhood, the opportunity in the market, you saw a gap in the market, and all of that just fitted together.
Yes. Yeah, but I think it's probably changed direction as well from where we sort of started. So when we started, when I started the business, it was very much just wanting to have chocolate cafes. So open up numerous chocolate cafes. It probably took a lot longer to get the cafe from an operational standpoint running smoothly, and tweaking and changing the menus constantly. And in the meantime, the wholesale, the online really grew. So actually, that's become the main part of the business. And actually, the cafe is a smaller part, which we're still looking to open more and expand, but definitely changed from the initial sort of direction of where I thought it would be.
Interesting about how businesses evolve and go down
Yes.
different sort of pathways, depending on where those opportunities lie and where they are.
Yeah.
There's some great examples of that. As I mentioned on a previous sort of discussion I had with somebody, I always think a great example of that is Amazon, where that it's set up as, the world's largest big bookstore.
Yeah.
And obviously it's so much more than that now, very different, because it's adapted and evolved over the years, depending on demand and opportunities. So,
Yes.
so what, what would you say the biggest challenge that you've faced being a business owner is? Since, because am I right? You set your business up around about 2010. Was it? Have I got that?
2012, 2013, around then.
So okay, so you've got 12, 13 years experience sort of in business. Over that time, what would you say your biggest challenge has been?
I think, probably multifaceted. I'd say for us as a business, it's having sort of a lot of moving parts. I'd say it's also, we're not selling, ongoing contracts that keep refreshing. So, every day, every week, every year is new and very hard to forecast, I'd say. So trying to forecast accurately is a challenge. I'd say being in sort of manufacturing and cafes, I think Brexit was a massive impact for all businesses in that area in the UK, which rely on staffing. And also exporting as well is a lot more challenging now to Europe since Brexit.
Yeah.
Cocoa prices is probably one of the biggest challenges recently.
Okay.
So they basically just shot. They were sort of relatively stable for 10, 20 years or so, the cocoa index, and then a combination of shortages of cocoa around the world due to climate change and bad crops, fueled, unfortunately, in a massive way by speculators, just shot the cocoa index up massively. So it sort of went from 2,000 to as an index to over 10,000. So so that resulted in chocolate prices tripling within 6 months.
Wow. So a lot of challenges there, and how do you overcome those challenges? So do you have a particular approach, a particular way that you deal with them when you've got all these different challenges?
I think it's just, again, as a business, I'd say that, we try to be quite nimble in the way that we react. Trying to react quickly to things is definitely a positive. We're not a tiny business anymore, but we're still a small business. So, but I think regardless of the size of business, I think it's really important to have that nimble and small business mindset and being able to react quickly. So, for example, the chocolate price is being able to jump on some, contracts to get us through for the next few months at more reasonable levels and things like that. And with the products, when we launch them, being able to create products incredibly quickly, because we have an idea in the morning, we sit around discussing things, we make it that afternoon, and at the end of the day we're all sitting around tasting it. So being able to develop things that quickly has definitely been a positive for us.
So as you're growing, and it's keeping that adaptability, as you refer to, being nimble, making sure that
Yes.
you maintain that within the business, even as you get bigger.
Yeah, and I'd say for us as well, it's very collaborative. It's not me, it's the team. It's very much all of us. We all have our strengths and weaknesses, and it's just working together and being collaborative. Whether it's an issue on the production line or an issue in the taste of a product or anything, or ideas, that come out from all levels of the business, from the most senior to the most junior.
Yeah.
And it's just about, especially for the more junior people, I think it's about encouraging them to speak up and, being able to present their ideas. We had somebody on the production line, an operative who, we had an issue on one of the machines and couldn't overcome. And he went home and designed something and 3D printed it and came in, and that was the solution. So, it's about encouraging people to be able to have that initiative and present it.
Wow. That demonstrates a real culture that you've obviously got within your business of, look, we're all here to contribute to solving these problems,
Yes.
and let's all work together. So I think that example really demonstrates that within the business, rather than sort of turning around and sort of saying, well, that's not my problem. Somebody else needs to deal with that. I'm just here to work the machine. Somebody else needs to
Yeah.
working for me. But we've got I love that. And how important is a team to a successful business?
Probably the most important thing, I'd say.
Yeah. Okay.
It's I mean, obviously the products, the quality, where you distribute it, the margins, all of that is incredibly important. But none of that would happen without the team.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. And what if you could solve one, if you had a magic wand and you could solve one challenge in your business right now, what would it be?
I think for us, the biggest challenge, because of the fact that we're doing really large volume runs for customers, and export and private label, we're doing relatively small runs for, some, specific products for online. So I think I think that's probably one of our biggest challenges we are working to solve at the moment, is just all of that leads to making sure that things are made efficiently, stock control, all of those sorts of things together. Because of those, if we were just making, let's say, if we were much smaller and we only had 6 people in production, it'd be a bit simpler for making the small runs. And if all we were doing were large runs and we had 3 production lines just running on one product, all day, every day, again, a bit simpler, but we're kind of doing all those sorts of things. So I think that's, for us, would be that challenge we're working towards solving at the moment.
Yeah. Okay. And what would you say your biggest learning since being in business is? Oh, sorry. Yeah, your biggest learning has been since being in business. We talked about the challenges, but what do you feel your biggest learning is?
I think just dealing with staff and who's a hire, for example. Making sure that you get the right people. You'll never get it right. I think you want to obviously try to in the best possible way. I think as you grow with experience and with learnings in the business, you probably learn a bit more about what to look out for in the people that you're interviewing. But I think it doesn't matter how experienced somebody is in doing that, you can always get it wrong. So I think it's also on the flip side of that, I think it's important to identify quickly when you do get it wrong, and then potentially parting ways, which would be better for the person and for the business. So I think it's also that as well, because I think you want the right people in the business. I think it's that the right people, the combination of people really builds that culture within that business, within any business.
Yeah, I think that reminds me of that phrase. What is it they say? Hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'd agree with that.
And how would you describe the culture within your business?
Yeah, I'd say, as I said before, I'd say it's collaborative, and I'd say hopefully it's sort of for the common good of the company and each other, and working together as a team to achieve shared goals, but on a genuine level. So,
and what would you say to anyone thinking of going into business, Darren?
I'd say to look at what business that they're going into, to make sure that they're going to actually enjoy it. I think being in business, whatever business it is going to be pretty full on. It'll be sleepless nights. It'll be a lot of hard work. So you got to make sure that, firstly, it's a sort of business you want to be in, and also to actually consider, do you actually want to be in business? For some people, being in a job, in a corporate role, or employed is a much better option, which is fine. There's no, it depends on the nature of the person. Some people much prefer turning up to work, working hard, going home, switching off, and that's it. And some people enjoy the stress and the challenges and the rewards of running their own business. So yeah, I'd say just to be sort of go into it eyes wide open, and look at the alternatives and make sure it's something that they do want to do. And if they do, then to seek advice from the right people and listen to others.
Great advice. And over, I should imagine for you, over the 12, 13 years that you've been in business, your role has very much sort of changed.
Yes.
How would you describe your role now? What are the main sort of priorities of your role now compared to what they were when you first started out?
I'd say it's still evolving on a regular and constant basis, to be honest. But I think starting out, when I first opened the kiosk, I was the one there serving the coffees and speaking to the customers. When we opened the cafe, I was also there working behind the till with everyone, which I just caused an absolute nightmare there because I'd be telling people to do different things and the manager would come out saying, "Why aren't you here?" And I said, "Oh, Darren told me to do something else." So I decided that probably wasn't the best place for me to be. So, and again, I think just trying to learn to be more hands off, trying to learn to delegate, to trust more to people, and encourage and to look over and to steer would be probably the changes and sort of more the role at the moment, but also being enough in the detail, knowing what is going on.
Yeah, I always think, when as you move on in the company, as you've quite neatly described there, when you start out, it can be very hands-on, kind of, working in the business, as the phrase goes. And then as you move on, it's working on the business in terms of strategy and people, leading the people, managing the people, thinking about where the business is going in the future. So yeah, okay. No, thank you for sharing that. And look, there's one question I always like to ask everyone that's kind enough to join me on this discussion, and that's what is the best advice that you would give to an 18-year-old you?
I think it would just be to, go out, follow your dreams, but also be sensible about it. So, look and plan towards the future. So, it might be that you might want to start a business that day, but, what are the downsides? I'm not saying not to, but, is it better that you go out and get a profession or get a trade or do an apprenticeship? And then, in the background, you can still work at nights, doing your business and building that up in the meantime. You don't have to stay in your professional trade for that long, but at least you've got that to fall back on. I think as 18 years old, I know there's lots of people that drop out of high school and become amazing successes, which is great, but, everyone's different. But for me, I would always suggest to follow your dreams, but also just make sure that you've got that comfort safety blanket, to fall back onto.
Yeah, I think that's a great piece of advice, in terms of, look, follow your dreams, work out where you want to get to, but have your plan of how you're going to get there. Right, what would be the best route to get me here? Is it best just to give up everything and focus on it now, or is it best to do some research, do some background, start testing and measuring whilst you've still got some security? So, it's looking at what's best for everyone. But yeah, I think, as you say, work out where you want to get to, and then work out your path of how you're going to get there. Great advice. Thank you, Darren. So Darren, I really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today and sharing more about your business, but also your journey as well. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated.